I'm painting a house in Arcadia, California. Twice a day for the last week, I've driven by Arcadia Park, where local service organizations have erected this memorial. They call it the Field of Honor. 1,000 flags, each with a name attached, a human being who died defending our freedom and our way of life. There has never been a war fought in Arcadia, of course. The United States has only twice been attacked on its own soil, and those horrors occurred thousands of miles from here. But as I walked among these flags, I thought about the 1.1 million Americans who have been cut down in service to their country. The phrase that kept repeating in my mind was this one: war is hell. That is part of a quote from William Tecumseh Sherman after he'd completed his ruthless march to the sea. The wide swath of utter destruction that he and his Union troops had cut across Georgia from Atlanta to Savannah during the last months of the war between the states. This is what Sherman called hard war. His men burned farms, killed livestock, tore up the railroad tracks, and destroyed everything they saw that might help the South to continue fighting. Undoubtedly, he'd read his military history, and the generals who devised the bombing of Hiroshima took lessons from Sherman's scorched earth policy. Surrounded by the flags that snapped in the breeze and stung my skin, I reflected on the terrible toll that a civil war takes upon its people in their own homeland. More Americans died in that war than in any other. And this was before we had airplanes and tanks and machine guns. This was one American killing another American, up close and personal. What is more tragic than that? I never went to war, but I came pretty close. When I was young, we had the draft, and every American boy was required to register when he turned 18. Every young guy carried a draft card that was like a ticket to a contest that might cost him his life. The draft had been scheduled to end on June 30th, 1971. But had been extended for 2 more years due to the Vietnam War. My older brother, who faced the draft lottery in 1968, drew a high number and was never conscripted. I sweated all through junior and senior years in high school as pictures of that bloody conflict flashed on the family television every evening. I graduated in mid-June of 1973 and turned 18 on the 20th. The draft extension expired 10 days later. I registered for a draft that lasted a week and a half. I was spared by nothing at all except simple, dumb luck. I've thought about war this whole week, driving past the Field of Honor each morning and again each evening. It hasn't escaped me that I might have been required to travel halfway around the world to fight in another civil war in another country where the North and South were so divided by ideology that they took to killing one another. What a strange name that is, civil war. Could anything be less civil than killing fellow citizens with whom you can't reach an agreement? Inside the very country about which you can't agree? I was once a Democrat. I became disillusioned with their ideas, and in particular with the smug superiority with which they dismissed the beliefs of Republicans. It wasn't just a failure to understand. It was an all-out determination not to understand. It was tribalism, and it was hatred. And the progressives I knew took great pleasure in hating conservatives without ever once listening to them. I wasn't alone when I finally left that party 7 years ago. The first stirrings of the walkaway movement were already being heard. When I joined up with conservatives, I did so because I was disgusted by the attitude of my former party. But these days I see that same dark energy building within the party I have now chosen. Donald Trump rose to office largely on the simmering anger of good, hard-working people who had grown very tired of being insulted and falsely accused, blamed for every form of oppression that the Democrats needed in order to gather their own troops under the flag of victimology. Trump supporters were damn tired of being blamed for what they never did and ignored for all the patriotic work they did do in keeping this country up and running. But social media and the 24-hour news cycle are in all of our lives now. Even farmers in the heartland have cable news and computers with high-speed Wi-Fi. A smartphone rides the hip of every construction worker. We can't escape our disagreements. And each one of us can, without a second's forethought, throw an electronic counterpunch at whomever he feels has insulted him. Our blue-collar logic videos have received millions of views and hundreds of thousands of comments. We can't read them all, but we do read an awful lot of them. I can't help but notice a hardening, a tribalism as deep as that which I fled in 2012. The idea of civil war comes up a lot, and unless I'm reading it wrong, it seems to be an idea gaining in popularity. What would such a war look like? There is no Mason-Dixon line that might be drawn. There's no 17th parallel. We're divided into red states and blue states, true enough. But these are just measures of majorities. I live in California. I know progressives who live in Iowa. We aren't divided by one or two huge issues either, but by virtually every issue. There's been a divvying up of all our traditional values, and the toxicity of the debate is such that the moment one side takes a firm stand, the other immediately takes up the opposing view just as firmly. The division is everywhere, right down to neighborhoods and families. Lifelong friends exchange insults and block each other on social media. It feels like a war brewing. But how can we possibly fight a civil war? What would that look like? Guys in 4x4 pickups strafing passing Priuses? The grid being destroyed to paralyze the cities? Highways blockaded at state borders and those with minority opinions forced to leave? The internet crashed by hackers or sealed against everybody not living in a coastal city? Stores sacked, gas stations closed, whole sections of New York and Los Angeles burned out and abandoned, refugee camps along every interstate, bridges blown, tracks pried up, and airfields destroyed? The mind boggles. To be honest with you, even as I wrote the last paragraph, a part of me was filled with relish. I can't resist any post-apocalyptic movie, no matter how cheap and ludicrous. Somewhere inside me lives the voice of chaos and destruction. I'm a primitive deep down, as are we all. Anybody who's read up on World War I will have seen how fully modern humans can turn brand new technology to savagery every bit as terrifying as the Mongols or the Roman legions, and somehow convince themselves that they are waging war to end all war. We must not let this go further. The soldiers we honor this weekend gave their only true possession. They gave their own sacred lives and every dream they'd ever have so that we could remain free and live in peace. They went halfway around the world and fought determined enemies to guarantee that war not be visited upon the land that they loved. Would they be proud of the way we've been acting? They sacrificed for us, and now it's our turn. It's up to us to halt this slide into utter division and disharmony. Our war must be against the division itself. We must find it in our hearts to forgive our opponents for the wrongness of their thinking. Our war is against bad ideas and the relatively small number of people promoting those ideas. We're not fighting the passive people who go along out of habit or fear of social isolation. The Rotarians and other service organizations whose members set out these 1,000 flags of remembrance are setting an example for all of us. There's no politics on display here, just gratitude and a desire to make a better world for us all. I pledged that in the next year, I'll participate in events and activities which require me to work with known Democrats. I pledged to keep my culture war weapons focused on the true perpetrators and not on those who follow along without thinking things through. And I promise to get better at explaining our core values and why it is so important that they not be lost. General Sherman's full quote goes like this: "I am tired and sick of war. Its glory is all moonshine. It is only those who have neither fired a shot nor heard the shrieks and groans of the wounded who cry aloud for blood, for vengeance, for desolation. War is hell." Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.